Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching this live, welcome. If you're watching on catch up, welcome also. I'm James Hadley, Executive Director of Musical Theatre Network, and we're very pleased to be doing I think it's the fourth in our series of Creating Consciously conversations. Each conversation looks at inclusivity and a particular area of a protected characteristic or a community in terms of individuals' experiences of best practice and inclusive practice in relation to musical theatre and theatre and the performing arts more widely. Tonight is a conversation about inclusivity and disability within musical theatre and theatre more widely. And before I hand you over to Meg McGrady, who initiated this series of Creating Consciously conversations, I'd just like to do a quick reminder that we are hurtling towards Beam 2023, which is our showcase of new musical theatre found from throughout the UK. It will be the fourth Beam showcase to date, and like every Beam showcase, it will include musicals originated by disabled artists. And this time round in Beam 2023, which is at Oxford Playhouse on the 25th and 26th of May, as well as having musicals that are disabled artist led, it also has a musical that is focused on historically disabled characters that will include a visually impaired led cast and creatively integrated access. I think it will be one of the first new British musicals that has a majority, or at least lead character-led visually impaired cast. We've certainly had many fully many disabled and visually impaired performers within musicals, but I think, as far as I know, this is one of the first original musicals that is written specifically for a visually impaired cast, which is very, very exciting. So yes, without further ado, I will hand you over to Meg McGrady.
Hello, folks. My name is Meg McGrady. I use they, them pronouns. I am a white, thin, androgynous human with short-shaved, kind of blacky brown hair. And I'm currently in like a black jumper. And yeah, nearly a year ago, I approached Musical Theatre Network about doing a more in-depth access and inclusivity panel series where we would go from community to community, identity to identity, looking at the nuances of creating for and with communities, so centering the voices of people from those groups. Last year, we did 3 amazing panels about transness, queerness, and neurodiversity, which I chaired and are available to watch online for free. However, this year, as we return, it felt time to pass the mantle to a different chair with different insights into different communities that I'm not a part of. But this whole series is about creating consciously and how we think about making work ethically. So that is what today's discussion is about from a personal point of view. This panel is about disability, specifically inclusivity and disability. And I can't wait to introduce you to our amazing chair, Amina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amina Hamid. I use she, her pronouns. I am a light-skinned Black woman with dark brown hair, currently wearing a red jumper. I'm very excited to be chairing this panel today, if slightly nervous, because it's a brilliant group of people. Just so that everybody is aware of what's going to happen, I'm going to hand over to each panelist to introduce themselves, and then we will dive into some questions. We will then slightly later on be taking questions from the audience, so do feel free to pop those in the chat on YouTube and we'll get to those when we open the floor. But to start us off, Michelle, can I hand to you to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Amina. Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Taylor. I'm Director for Change at Ramps on the Moon. I'm a middle-aged woman, white woman. I have grey, short, spiky hair. I'm wearing a blue jumper and round red glasses. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Beth, if I can pass to you.
Of course, thank you. I should start by saying I'm a huge technophobe, so if I just do something strange on Zoom, I'm very sorry. My name is Beth Hinton-Lever. I'm an actor. I use she, her pronouns. I'm white. I have brown hair, which is very 80s looking, despite anything I try. I've got a huge side fringe. I have blue eyes. I was born without my lower right forearm, and I'm currently wearing a blue checkered top because 80s, I guess.
Amazing. And Robert?
My name is Robert Copperfield. I use he, him pronouns. I am a youngish looking middle-aged man, white man with short dark hair, and I'm wearing a dark green top tonight. I'm the artistic director of Birds of Paradise Theatre Company based in Glasgow, and I'm also a writer, director, actor. Basically, anything that I can get paid for, I'll give that a go.
That is great. I'm a producer as well, just a producer. I wish I had any other talents, but I do not. So I'll try and also pop in some of my insights where I can. To start us off, I thought we'd do a slightly more open question, which is, can you take us through some of the things that you take into consideration when entering a new show or rehearsal room or theatre or space in general that other people might not take into account? Beth, can we start with you?
Of course. Great question. I think I guess with reading a script for the first time or taking an audition, one of the first things I would do would be ask for the script, which I have spoken to other actors about whether they do that who are non-disabled. And a lot of the time they would not read the full script or not ask for the full script before they'd go into possibly audition for a process or take on a role or a job. Whereas I think as a disabled person, it's something that I have to take into consideration, because having me, a disabled person, a physically disabled person on a stage, having that body on that stage for me is a political act. You're already saying something without me even opening my mouth, without the character even introducing themselves. You've said something. So I need to make sure for me and my community and my politics and where I stand within that, that they kind of align. I'm not saying I only play, I guess, like good, nice characters, but I need to make sure that it's not, I guess, there's no nefarious undertones in there of me playing that role. So I guess, for an example, every character I ever play is queer and disabled, because I can't splice that away from myself. That is me. That is the essence of me. And for me, acting is telling the truth and finding how you fit in to that character and how you would enhance and breathe life into that character. So it's about, for me, reading the full script, looking at everyone around it, how that character's treated, how they treat other people, and seeing whether me and my body and all of my lived experience is going to be an asset to that character in that show and that community and ethos and world they're creating, or whether maybe, no, actually, for me and this character, we jar. There's something that's there's maybe an underhanded kind of, I don't like this politics, or where that would be leading by me, a disabled, physically disabled queer woman on stage saying this. So I think those are things that I consider before even taking an audition, let alone if it is a disabled character. I will look at where the audition room is. If the audition is happening in an inaccessible audition room and it's a disabled character, I know they're more than likely not going to be auditioning wheelchair users for that role. And so I have to then, for me, for my own kind of politics and how I like to work within the industry, maybe send an email and say I would audition, but only if it's accessible to a lot more of my community to also audition. So those are a few things. I will stop talking now, but those are a few things I think about immediately from the off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really beautiful. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to take on, definitely. Robert, I know you wear a lot of hats. So obviously in the actor hat, what do you think about in the same sense to Beth, but also in terms of when you're building rooms, what sort of things do you think about?
Yeah, let me do that in reverse, because I'm just about to start another rehearsal process tomorrow, so this is all quite fresh in my head. And every time I start a rehearsal process, first thing we do is to gather around a bit of big old filled out paper and go and to answer the question of what do we all need to do our best work in this room? And that simple question, yes, it's about access needs, it's about understanding the access needs of the actors, of the creators, of the crew, of everyone in that room, but also it places access requirements beyond disability. So it's not just about disability, it's about everyone coming to the room and going, this is what I need here now to do my best work. We could also then put it into the context of work. And that's what we're all doing. We're all there to do a job and to do the best job that we can do in that situation. And by doing that, I find a lot of people will volunteer information that they haven't already told us about, so we can respond to that. I'm always very clear that just because you declare something or you request something, it doesn't mean we can always make it happen. Some access requirements are contrary to other requirements. You know, if someone requires a very dark room and the next actor requires a very light room, then what do? You compromise. You think then to make it work. And so yeah, like I say, it doesn't mean we always can make it happen, but if we don't know about it, then we can't make it happen. And that bit of paper goes up on the wall, becomes a sort of working document for that rehearsal process. And we keep going back to it as well, we keep repeating it again, because quite often what people will tell you on day one of a rehearsal process is very different to what they tell you on day 20. And we acknowledge that, that's fine, that's, how it works. So that's the main approach as a director that I take. And I imagine most of our directors don't do that. So I guess I give it. As an actor, I'm trying to think. I guess I started acting 20 years ago now, so I'm quite old at this stuff. And when I started, there was a real sense of apology, of trying to fit in, of trying to do whatever you can not to stand out, not to make demands, and to get on with the job, because you were so grateful for being there. And obviously now things have thankfully moved forward. We haven't got that same sense of apology, but I know that I still carry a bit of that. So I know that going to rehearsal process as an actor, I still work out what do I need to ask for and what can I do on my own, what can I make happen on my own. And I don't think that's entirely a bad thing. I think all that does come into the rehearsal room and a little bit of, I think gratitude is a word. And that sounds a little bit iffy, but ultimately, as an actor, you are very privileged to be there, and you're very privileged to have that chance to take on that role and to speak to an audience night after night. And so, yeah, that gratitude is what I bring into a process. But now, in 2023, balancing that with understanding that I've got a right to be there, and that as a disabled person, I've got a right to ask for what I need. And so that sort of balance is quite an ongoing process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fair to say there is privilege to have each of you in the room as you are to be there. So it's much more even. I think it's really hard to see that when you've been like hired to do something, to not have. I do think gratitude is a good word for it. But absolutely, it feels like, oh, I shouldn't ask for something even though I really need it, because I've gotten here. They've let me in. And Michelle, obviously your job's slightly different, but in terms of making those faces.
Sure. I mean, I think there is some relevance as well to the spaces that I go into and what I have to think about. And just picking up on, I mean, Beth and Robert's answers have been brilliant. I think for me, I loved the question because it actually reminded me of how much additional work we do as disabled people before we go into a space and before we get into a relationship, and how much of that actually I just take for granted. So it almost becomes invisible. It's really effortful, but it's almost invisible for me. And I forget that other people don't have to do it, or don't have to do it to the same extent or in the same way. So for me, a lot of it comes down to, what is my gut telling me about the people who are making these spaces? Can I trust them? So yeah, there are the practical considerations, like, what's the furniture like? Am I going to be expected to stand up for a long time? Am I going to be expected to sit at a table and work? Because if I am, then am I going to be able to reach to be able to work satisfactorily at the table? And if not, what then happens to my dignity and my professionalism, quite apart from the physical state of my body? So it's those kinds of things. Will I be able to park? Will I be expected to navigate stairs? That kind of stuff. Can I trust the answers if I ask those questions? And can I trust that whatever is being said, that actually I'm there on merit, and I'm there because I'm welcome, and I'm not being tolerated, and I'm not being seen as a nuisance. So a lot of it does come down to that kind of, that intangible, I suppose. Do you know what? I suppose the question that goes through my mind every time is, am I going to be okay? That's what it boils down to. Am I going to be okay? And therefore, the flip side of that, when I support other people to make spaces and when I make spaces, is, how can I not just make sure that everybody's okay? How can I message that genuinely I want everybody to be okay, and that it's not only acceptable and fine, but I actively want people to tell me if something isn't okay. So it's as much about the communication as it is about the actual thing, I think, for me.
Absolutely. I think sort of building on that, and the sense of, am I going to be okay? And what Beth was saying about it being a political act and having to take on, what it means to be in that space, and fighting with that challenge of, oh, well, it's a privilege to be in the room. I'm actually going to skip one of my questions, but I'll come back to it. But I think I'd be really interested to hear how you feel things can be made more welcoming, so that you aren't necessarily asking those questions as much. What could somebody do as they first approach you for a part, as they first approach you about a meeting, or coming into a space, or being part of a process? What are your sort of, if somebody said these things to me, I feel a lot more at ease, and I feel like things would be moving in the right direction. Who should we start with? That's such a big question. I'm going to be slightly kind. But yeah, can we start? Michelle, can we start with you actually?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna subvert the question a bit, I'm afraid, because in the end, at the risk of repeating myself, it's less what somebody says and it's more the intent and the attitude. It really is. But I definitely want information. I want lots of information. Give me too much information. I mean, that says more about me than anything else, as just my personality, but I want lots of information. If I don't need the information, I'll bin it. But give me too much information. But don't assume that you've given me all the information I'm going to need. And reassure me that I can ask questions as often as I need to get the information embedded in my brain. But it is, for me, it is much more about about attitude, and it's about being open, and it's about recognizing that having the conversation is absolutely fine. And I'm not there to educate you. I mean, a lot of the time I actually am, because that's literally my job. But let's assume I'm not. I'm not there to educate you, but I am there to have a conversation about what I need. What I'm looking for, what am I looking for? I'm looking for a bit of humility. I'm looking for an openness. I'm looking for some level of competence with these issues. I'm looking for a willingness to have the conversation, and I'm looking for a lot of information.
Very understandable. I think information's always the best thing. It also feels like it leans a lot into what Robert was saying about being changeable, and the conversation always being constant and there, and open. And I'm keen, Robert, to hear what sort of your response to the question is, but also what you think about that.
Yeah, I think I've been involved in processes where at the start of the process the right things have been said and they've given the right indications, and then after a year or more of taking a step back and going, actually, you don't believe what you said back then, or if you do, then your actions contradict what you said back then. So in a way, I don't really care what you say. I care what you do. I care that you listen. And I think we're very bad at listening in the industry. I think you work with the right people and they do listen. But I've worked with some people who, like you say, can pay lip service, can see the right things, can tick the boxes. But ultimately, they don't listen. And I think in my naivety, I maybe did the things that they do sometimes. And it's not go quite a bit into the process that you go, yeah, you haven't heard anything that's said. So it's the old cliche of actions speak much louder than words. And you will, I will make my mind up on how you behave and what you do rather than what you say. Because people know how to say the right thing now. Most people working at a certain level know how to use the right words and know how to make it sound what they understand. It's not always the case.
Absolutely. Actions speak louder than words. I completely understand that. Beth, sort of the same question, but kind of turning it a little bit towards the positive. Have there been any examples of practices where you felt really held and you felt like it's worked really well? And is there anything you can pinpoint in that you feel like you'd love to carry forward as you go forward?
Yeah, thank you. Again, great question. I think I completely agree with Michelle and Robert on the fact that it is that dialogue and that kind of constant checking in, but not in in an alienating way where you are only asking those that you are perceiving as needing that question asked. You are, I think, the parity and the equitability, if I've said that right, of the environment you're creating. So you're not only going to send me in an email, what are your access requirements? You're going to send everyone going into that room the same kind of, what do you need? Because, I'm currently in a rehearsal room that's not free, but that wouldn't have come from, asking only the disabled people in the room. That comes from asking everyone, how do you make your best work? How do we make a room to ensure that you can make your best work? And I'm so lucky that I've been in quite a few rooms that do that. And I think my first job after drama school was I went to go work with Grey Eye Theatre Company, who are an inclusive theatre company, and I felt so held and so strongly shown what it is to be working towards the golden standard of practice. And I think another thing to say is, you are going to get it wrong, but know that you're going to get it wrong and enjoy having those conversations, and don't be fearful of effing up, because everyone does all the time. And it's learning from those things. And also, everyone is different. The requirements that I have day to day completely change. And most of the time, that's not particularly to do with my right forearm. That's to do with how I am. And I think that's for everyone going into any room. And it's that knowledge that human beings change day to day, and not every day is going to be the same, and not every actor is going to be the same, and having that constant conversation is key, I feel. Again, I think it's the idea that pace, especially in musical theatre, I think I'm going to introduce a word, and I'm going to explain it very badly, but I feel like the others can do it well. But ableism, which is, in my view, kind of an attitude or actions against people who are disabled, neurodivergent, along those lines. So anything to do with disregard or abuse around that characteristic. And I feel like pace is one, because musical theatre especially, but all theatre, as we know, we push through. We usually have about 3 weeks to get an entire show done. And things like tech usually take 3 or 4 days, and they are very long days. And it's things like taking the time to go, is everyone comfortable with what we've just done? And if we need extra time, we need extra time within that. And I think the only real way to start having these conversations and to really change the, not only the attitude, but the way that we all work to make it more inclusive, is to have them right at the beginning of the process, and right before you know who your cast is, who you know who your creative team is. So it's actually not particularly to do with disability at this point. It's to do with how do we make this show so that anyone can come in and be a part of our world. So if it's a really technical tech, maybe it is going to take longer, and maybe you make those provisions immediately. If you know for a fact that you are aiming, and as I think every show should, to have a inclusive cast, an inclusive creative team, look at how you're creating that set. And I think it's that kind of forethought of, you don't add this at the end. This isn't something you tack on at the end of a process, or when you look at your cast and go, ooh, we've got Beth Hinton-Lever, so maybe we won't give her 10 chairs to carry or something. But like, it's something you think about right at the beginning. I don't think I answered any question, but there were a few things.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yeah, I think you've really tapped into one of the most important parts, at least in my practice, which is bringing it in at the beginning and it not feeling like an add-on. I think that is a huge part of everything. And as a producer, it's not a surprise every time I've had a creative team at the end of the process go, what if we throw in a relaxed performance? And you go, why? Why are we adding that on? We've already done tech, so we'll need to re-tech. So why didn't we do that from the beginning? Why wasn't that part of the show? And why isn't that part of the show's fabric? I think for me particularly, it's always been, how do I make sure that it's as part of the show's fabric as possible, and having those conversations. I think there's something as that you said, Beth, as well, about being singled out as the person that has requirements or that has anything else. And I remember when I was at school, don't know if that's happened to anyone else, but I had to have a meeting with the access advisor once a term, and I had nothing to say in the meeting because I didn't really know what I needed. So I sort of made something up because I felt like I had to. And nobody else was asked what they needed, in spite of the fact that everybody else did need other things. It was just, those of us who were identified as dyslexic or me. And so I just ended up not using scissors for the whole of my time at school, because I was like, I can't cut things easily, I guess. But it was because I felt very, very singled out. And I suppose what I'm trying to tap into from that is I've been working a lot more with new mothers in processes. And one thing that I've realized is that there's this conversation around motherhood that actually I think really aligns with the conversations that we have around disability in spaces. Because although motherhood isn't a disability, there's a lot of requirements that come with it. And I think it's one of those things that will hopefully lead us towards not talking about access requirements as only solely about people with disabilities or people who are neurodivergent, but that broadens that out as well to everybody who might have caring responsibilities or who might have anything else, because it really does do that. And in that vein, one of the questions I wanted to ask, because going back to sort of what Beth said at the beginning about that responsibility to be representing in the space and being on stage, being a political act, and the weight that carries with it. I'm really keen to ask the question around that, and I'm absolutely going to steal something from Stokely Carmichael here. So but I'm going to explain it as if it's my own because it's easier. But there was a sense within the civil rights movement in America that integration wasn't integration. What it actually was about was assimilation. And I think that sort of taps into those early rooms that Robert was talking about, and really is against what we're trying to talk about here, which is inclusivity, right? And true inclusion isn't about assimilation, but is about meaningful integration. And so my long-winded ramble is going to get to a question, I promise. Which is how do you deal with that weight and with that hope? Because I think there has to be a hope, right? There has to be a reason to do it. So how do you keep the hope, and how do you deal with that weight of all of that to hold? Robert, can I start with you?
Yeah. I think I go back to the point I made about being grateful, and not in a I'm so lucky, as disabled people, but yes, I'm so lucky as people to be in this room together and to explore telling a story to other people who pay to come and listen to us talk. And that is a great privilege. So that, to me, that's what keeps me going from production to production, is going more telling these stories, especially stories about disabled people, of disabled people, by disabled people. It's such a privilege that we get to do that. So that I think that's what keeps us going. I think this idea of true inclusion, of true integration becomes part of the fabric. When I think of that we all know what we're talking about, but it's very hard to define what that really is. It's really hard to write a rule book and go, if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll get true inclusion. Like, it doesn't work that way. But as a person who's been in that room when that happened, I can go, yes, that was it. So I think that feeling and that sense of being part of something, part of a bigger whole, is so important and drives us all as artists, disabled or not. I think that thing about connection, being part of something, inclusion, it all is, to me, what keeps me going forward and keeps me doing this stuff. That and the fact that I don't know how to do anything else. So, I do really crap in builder or architect, so this is what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I suppose I think I'm probably older than anybody else on this call, so I've got a perspective on a journey that is perhaps longer than others, and that's really helpful for holding the hope, because I can see how far we've come. But also, how do I manage it? Well, I get very angry a lot of the time. I mean, that's the truth of it. But the other advantage of being a bit older, and having a job that, and I alluded to it earlier, that is literally about talking to people about what they can do to improve the lot of disabled people that they want to work with, is I know that if I'm in a space, I'm usually there and people know what they're going to get, and rightly or wrongly, I take that as permission. So I take that as permission to call them out, really, and I convince myself that, well, they knew they were going to get that, so if they didn't want it, they shouldn't have asked me. But I think the long view is really important. But I also think it's really important, for me, rigor is really important. And this sounds contradictory, but for me, in holding the hope, I want to hold the hope of what it could be, because it isn't. And so the hope and knowing that it isn't, those two things don't contradict each other. So I want to hold the hope of what it could be. And for me, I actually, to be completely honest, I have a problem with the word inclusion and inclusive. I have a problem with that. And it comes back to that word that Beth used earlier, which is the word ableism. That one of the things that I say sometimes is that, talking about how far we've come, 20 years ago, I used to be on the outside looking in. I now find myself very often on the inside looking on. I'm still not actually part of it, because essentially the structures are still ableist. So for me, ableism is systemic. And if the structures are still ableist, then I don't want to be included in that, because that inevitably becomes assimilation. So I want you to allow me to impact the structures. I want you to allow me to tear them down, actually, and start again with me. And that sounds very negative and it can be quite rageful. But hope dwells with that as well for me, because if I didn't have hope, I wouldn't bother anymore, I guess. So I think hope is part of a really complex mix of seeing where we've come from, being really dissatisfied and at times raging about where we are, but knowing we can be somewhere different.
That's really beautiful. I think that's I'm going to make you follow it, Beth, which is, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for that. Michelle. Oh, yes, I want to go lobbying with you immediately. But I completely agree. I think the structures, society itself, but the structures, especially within theatre, weren't set up for people like us. They were set up, let's be real, by a very specific body type, by a very specific race, by a very specific gender. And we are still using those structures. So inherently, we are always, even if we're in a good room, there's always going to be inherent ableism there. Down to the fact that most theatres can't accommodate disabled performers or creatives or lighting engineers, and but yes, going back to hope. I think I love what I do, truly, deeply. I would not be doing it. To be very honest, I wouldn't be putting myself through these conversations and these tech processes and quick changes and things like that if I wasn't entirely enamored with what we do, and I am. And I think one thing that really gives me hope, and because I think when I first started, I should say, wasn't always an actor, was an archaeologist first, but now I'm an actor. I started angry. I started wanting to yell at everyone. I didn't understand why, everything was on me, and I felt this responsibility to be the best in the room and prove why I was there. And if I somehow got something wrong or I wasn't the best on stage, people would then watch that and say, well, she's only there because she's disabled. Or even worse is what I put on myself, which is, if I don't do this well enough, they will never hire another disabled person. And that is the quickest way to burn yourself out. And I think one thing that now that I'm slightly older and have, I guess, been in more rooms and settled a little bit in my own craft and who I am, have realised that isn't true. And to be honest, I think what gave me hope was realising I'm just not that important. If I get this wrong, it will carry on. And I think that long view of we have been fighting this fight as a community forever. And we will continue to, because I think it's in our nature. And my community is like, our community is beautiful and we talk to each other. And I think something that really gives me hope at the moment, and has done for quite a few years now, is the allyship that I experience in rooms, and that kind of want to do better, even if you're doing a show where either budget or time frame or whatever it is can't accommodate, but it's the conversation, the want, the hope, the well, next time. And yes, that's frustrating in itself, but I have to look at where we are and acknowledge how far we've come. I am truly dissatisfied, and I don't think I'm ever going to be satisfied with where we are and how much we achieve, because I think that's a dangerous thing. Going back to, you're never going to get it right. We're never going to be there, but that's beautiful in itself. It's that hope and the want to get closer, and that's all it is. And I think that's a really big thing for people, I guess, outside of this community, who want to help, which is an unhelpful word, I think, but who want to do better, who want to be more aware, more available to change. I think it's just that want, and that's all. Like it, because there is no list. There's no like tick box list of, right, well, we've done that, cool, and we've done that, great, so this is now a fully accessible and inclusive show. It doesn't exist. So it's that, just try. And I think there is a lot more of that at the moment. And yes, not everyone, and it's not always great, but I'm seeing a lot more of the want, and not just from our community. I think that's the exciting thing. It's from shows that have nothing to do with the community, who basically are doing it because audiences will come from our community. And I think someone here must know the statistic. It's an incredible statistic, isn't it, of like the amount of disabled theatre goers that there are. And I think it's catering to them without us having to be in the room to do that work. So I think that's the hope, and that's what I'm seeing more of. And that's what excites me, and that's why I guess I'm still here in a sense.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. Building on that idea of structures and changeable structures and buildings, I think actually the last time I did a panel for MTN, I said that old buildings can be changed as much as old industries. I've just quoted myself, which makes me feel very uncomfortable. But I do think it's very true. And I wonder, in that sort of breaking things and starting again, which I think is the most positive thing in the world. I know that breaking has negative connotations, but I definitely agree with you, Michelle, that there's a lot of room for growth in what's broken. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about those spaces, and those spaces for audience members particularly, and whether in musical theatre or your experience of wider theatre as an audience member, either in the industry or before you were in the industry. What means a lot to you? What is important to see, as, because I feel like that's a very different question to what's important when you're coming into a room. Michelle, can we start with you? I see you nodding.
Sure. I mean, I think I have two kinds of answer, really, Amina. And one is very simply seeing myself on stage. Seeing myself on stage is still breathtaking to me. Seeing people like me on stage when they don't have to be is and I had an experience at Nottingham Playhouse. Actually, I live in Nottingham pre-pandemic, where I went to see a show, and I sat all the way through the first half, and I was enjoying it. It was great. And then it was about 5 minutes into the second half when I turned to the person next to me and went, "They're disabled." And I hadn't noticed. And I loved that I hadn't noticed. And then I loved that I noticed. And they didn't need to be, the character didn't need to be. And it was anachronistic and a bit anarchic. And it was, so seeing myself on stage is kind of the big thing, but at a very practical level in terms of spaces, do you know what the biggest, most important thing? Well, two things. A bar I can get to and get served over is really nice, actually. And it is connected, is good crowd control. Honestly, the number of evenings at the theatre that have just turned into an enormous trial and have really distressed me, actually, because the crowd control has been so bad. And the spaces are so small and so cramped with so many people in them who are all going in different directions, and there's furniture in the way. And when you're small and feeling vulnerable, that's really hard. If you're asking me for one thing, it would be that in terms of spaces, just better crowd control.
Yeah, I think that's understandably very important. Beth, what are you?
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of who you're making the show for. And I think the answer to that shouldn't be disabled people. It should be everyone. And I think it's that, I'll use the word creative access, which I hope kind of means something to everyone here and everyone watching. It's that from the inception of this idea, of this show, of this world you've made, who have you made that world with and for? And Michelle, I completely agree with you. You can't be what you can't see. You can't, it's impossible to have those dreams. And let's be real, we work in the creative industry. We all dreamt to be here. No one ends up here by mistake, particularly. You have to want this. You have to choose to go into this career. So I think that, who's your world for? And if I can't see myself on the stage, or if I can't see the thought of, well, when we have captions, and that, again, just any accessible shows, it shocks me how little accessible, what is the sentence there? How little of accessible shows there are in a run. That will always shock me. And it's that my community isn't an afterthought. And Amina, you said it before, it's not something you can tack on at the end. You can't go, what would be good if in a week we make this show accessible? You can't. It needs to be there from the inception, and it's make the world with us, make the world for everyone. There's a beautiful saying, nothing about us without us. And I think I am occasionally a choreographer, but I'm not really on creative teams, but there should be access consultants there, and there should be people there from the beginning who can help you with that. No one has all the answers, but someone could be there to give you the right questions and to help. And we are not expecting you to know that. We're asking you to get someone to help you with that. And I think that's the thing. If I go into a show and I see creative access, and I see myself on the stage, and I see there's a breakout room that's quite clearly spoken about and is available to get to. And I guess on a different level, culture within theatre, especially, I guess, big old classic theatre, of how you react, how you are in an auditorium, how you are allowed to express yourself when you're watching a show. A lot of these things that theatre has decided for itself in a way, or at least for many, many years, has been the case, are so ableist and so archaic in that form. And some of the best nights out in theatre ever have been because of people heckling and things like that. And maybe I shouldn't have said that. I'm not suggesting heckling, but I'm suggesting however you experience the show and however you react to the show is great. And I've been on stage when people are reacting, and there's that fable of it being distracting and things like that. It's not. If I'm doing my job right, and also I've been allowed to be briefed into that world and allowed to be spoken to from maybe an access consultant or by someone, or I guess it's the talk that people do about relaxed performances, but it should be every performance, because theatre's there to share stories, to understand ourselves better, to see a different way of life. And if you are constantly already thinking, I should be laughing that loud, or oh, I can't do that, or you're not really experiencing theatre for theatre. And I think I've lost myself in my own point, but there was something in there. But yeah, I think who's allowed to be in your world, I think, is the main thing I'm trying to say. And I think that goes for everyone. I don't think that's a disabled thing. I think that's a, you know, was I thought about? Was there any, like, who are you making this for? And if the answer is whoever's got the money or anything like that, you're not doing it. I shouldn't say right, but you're not making the theatre that I would, I guess, enjoy, but that I would feel comfortable with. I'm going to stop now.
No, I think that's really beautiful. Not having rules in order to be sat in an audience. I think most of the time they have paid for a ticket. Why are we giving them all these societal rules where we're like, be quiet, don't do these things, gotta do this, and building those spaces in collaboration with the actors so that it's not distracting and it can be just part of the process. Robert.
Yeah, right. I thought a question was something. And I think one of the things, I mean, yes, everything Michelle and Betty said, absolutely, all of that. I think on the issue of rules, I think it's very tempting to say, let's get rid of the rules. But actually, I don't think that's the right answer. I think it's about questioning what the rules are, because theatre and any other form is inherently about rules, you know. The play starts at 7:30, it ends at 9 p.m. We have an interval. So there are so many rules that are there for a good reason. And some of the rules, like you can't move or you can't make a noise, yes, we should question them, look at what their purpose is. But I don't think it's about getting bigger rules, I think it's about questioning which ones should be there. And one other really practical thing from an audience point of view is about where in the auditorium can I sit? As a future user, usually I'm given the back row if I'm lucky of the stalls. In some cases that's great, in some cases it's rubbish. But I've got no choice, that's where I have to sit. Now, as a director, I know that the experience of a piece of work is very different in the front row, it's very different in the balcony, it's very different in the middle of the stalls. And doing tech, because I can come out of my wheelchair, I can experience the show any way that I want to experience it. But doing a run, I have to sit at the back. And that's something a bit unfair about that, and so we have to question. Now that's not an easy thing to solve. You know, we can't, it's not easy to make every seat in every auditorium accessible to everybody. But I do think we have to push what we expect of auditoriums, and we need to go to the next level. Most theatres now, I hope, please, are accessible to some degree. But if it's only to a small number of seats, then it's not quite enough. There's more.
Absolutely, absolutely. Also, they managed to move all of the chairs for social distancing. So I feel like you're not asking that much.
Absolutely. And if you look at something like a big tech period for a musical like Hamilton, they take out the whole of the songs to take it. Now they can do it for that. They can do it for us. Of course, it costs money, it reduces capacity. Oh, but yeah, get over it.
Absolutely. I'm keen for us to open to any audience questions that might have come through. as much as I can probably ask you all questions until the end of time. But let's just have a look and see if there's anything. As I said, do pop them in the YouTube chat, and they should hopefully come through to us. It's a very pregnant pause, that. Well, while we, oh, there we go. Oh, great. Okay, this is a good question. I like this a lot. So the question is, what's your favorite example of creatively integrated access? And Robert, if we start with you on that one.
Damn it. Because I know one of the things that I've done, but in a way they play out. And actually, it's not the recent work where I think the productions that I've been involved in have done it more. But I think the very early production that I directed, called Wendy House, was a sex comedy about a disabled woman. And we had captions, we had BSL integrated, we did all of that, but the audio description in that show was, it was a character who was recorded, and it was an audio describer who was very offended by what was going on stage. So the whole audience got to hear how offended this woman was by all of these sexual jokes and all of this content. And actually, it was back in 2014 when stuff like this wasn't happening quite as much. And to listen to the audience react to that and to see how they could get so much more from the show because of that access, and then for them to realise that we're also doing it for the visually impaired audience members, which is very enjoyable to witness that and see that they got that bigger picture. So yeah, sorry, I know that's quite an ego trip to talk about my own work, but there we go.
No, if that's the best example, you got to use it. I'm completely back using your own work. That's absolutely fine. Michelle.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to use a Ramps on the Moon example, Robert. So you and me both. I'm going to choose two. One was a piece of musical theatre, and it was The Who's Tommy, the new Wolsey production of The Who's Tommy, which integrated captions in an imperfect but exciting way. It was experimental, it was exciting, and that was great. And the BSL was also beautifully integrated into the choreography, as well as two of the lead characters were native BSL users, so they had voiceovers. So that was just a great piece of work. It was joyous, it was in your face, it was a joyous piece of work. And the other one was Leeds Playhouse's production of Oliver Twist, which is available on NT at Home platform, actually. But again, it's an example of audio description, and the wonderful Ben Wilson, who used to be our agent for change at Sheffield Theatres and is a fantastic audio description consultant, was audio description consultant on that production, as well as playing Mr. Bumble. And he had a real passion for creative audio description that was giving blind and partially sighted people a different experience. It wasn't, sometimes audio description can be a second-hand version of the sighted experience. And Ben's really clear that that's not the job of audio description. It's not to translate the sighted experience for blind and partially sighted people. It's to create a different experience, a different creative journey. And so they had little kind of audio cues and almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like musical montages for each character as they came on stage, and it was really, really beautifully done, and very exciting to see that happen.
Amazing. I'm gonna have to watch it on NT. Beth.
Hi. I have so many that I've loved, and I'd caution say I don't have a favorite, but I think I love it all. I love seeing accessible performances, and I think there's a few examples that I'll say now, but out of thousands that I could pick. I think talking about audio description, my first job after drama school was Reasons to Be Cheerful, which was an Ian Dury and the Blockheads musical with Grey Eye Theatre Company, and I had never done any access or any accessible performances before, so learning what integrated meant was an incredible thing to do, but learning what integrated meant in a punk show was the most fun. So they have the audio describer that was working with us on that show particularly, it's called Pickles, Wayne Pickles Norman, and he was incredible, and I was learning while being on stage what audio description was from these like laughs that were happening after. So because Pickles was making jokes about us, and they were getting this, again, like what Michelle said, they were getting a completely different show, but it was better, like by the sound of the laughs. It was amazing. And the same with the integrated BSL, you'd hear these laughs happening at different times, and there is something so joyous about that, about we are not all experiencing this show the same, but we are all in the world, and the world is looking after us as best as possible, but also giving us different information. And that was really exciting to kind of be a part of that and to learn that from doing a show and being on stage with it and getting to actually witness audience reactions. And that was just joyous. Again, with a show I did right before the pandemic, which unfortunately was closed because of the pandemic, but I did Treasure Island at Derby Theatre, and I was playing Long John Silver, which was very fun as a disabled person to get to play that role, but also got to murder a lot of people, so it was very fun. It was a big musical, and it was amazing, and we decided that my Long John Silver, just to be slightly more villainous and slightly more dastardly, could understand British Sign Language, which was constant throughout. There was always, it was integrated, and there was always BSL being used. But we decided that my Long John Silver would lie about that. So that when the good guys were trying to, I can't believe I'm using myself as an example, that's just occurred to me. But when the good guys were trying to plot against me, they would be signing to each other, thinking, because I told them that I didn't understand it, that I couldn't. But the audience had this beautiful sense of dramatic irony, because they were doing it right in front of the villain watching, that they knew could understand what they were saying. So there was this like beautiful, and because it was for a lot of children, there was like this beautiful kids constantly going, she knows what you're saying, she knows. And it was just amazing. It was incredible to kind of let people in to our world that way, because I think a lot of the time theatre can be very, if you understand it, you understand it, but there's something so beautiful about integrated access and creative access that gives you the chance to invite the audience in with you and to give them something for them specifically, and to let them know, like, we've thought about you, we hear you, and we want you here, and we want you to be in this world with us. And I think that's the most important, the most beautiful thing we can do as creatives, and especially as an actor. That's my job, to let you in on what I'm feeling. And if I'm doing my job right, hopefully you will feel that. So there's loads. I saw a show at the National recently, Amit Sharma directed it, called The Boy with Two Hearts, and the creative captions for that, and I wish I could tell you who it was, but I don't know, were beyond beautiful, and I'd never seen it done that way. So the word truck was written and looked like a truck. It was just stunning. And I don't use captions as a person, but they were there, and they were there for everyone, and they enhanced the show tenfold. They were absolutely beautiful, and things like that. I think it's just exciting, and I think the possibilities are endless, and really the limit is your imagination. That was wank, but it's true. And I think it's just exciting, and it shouldn't be seen as a guess for doing the caption performance. It's look at this other world we can create, and how can we use this accessibility, this thing that we're doing, as another character to add to the show, to add to the piece, to give people more to play with. And that's what's exciting about it. And I think that's what I love about creative access. That wasn't an example, but good.
No, that's great. I really enjoyed that you started this by saying you don't play just really good characters, and we've now heard that you played the most villain of villains. I
killed a 7-year-old, Amina.
Oh no!
I killed a 7-year-old. We had a community ensemble, and I, in cold blood, and very much enjoyed it.
I do want to pick up on something you said though about the fact that it was leaving drama school that was the first time you'd done a performance, that was integrated in the access, and talk a little bit about that. We do have a couple of other questions which I will get back to, I promise, but I'm really keen to talk about that entry point and what, should that be part of drama school training? I feel like the answer is yes. That's a terrible question, but how do you make it as integrated in the way that we enter the industry as well? That's a big question. Michelle, can I start with you?
I disagree. I think it's a very small question. You do it in the same way as you do sound and lighting and all of that other stuff. You just do it. Sorry, I'm being facetious, and I'm kind of not. I don't get why it's not there. I don't understand it.
That's a great answer.
Because it's exciting.
Yeah, you just do it. That's great. So sort of building on that a little, and building on I guess how as well. So I didn't go through any formal training to become a producer, for example. I think if you're going to drama school, that you're part of your schooling should absolutely be that, and should be it should be within that. I wonder if there's space outside of that for temporary training or building it into processes, or what that looks like. I think I'm seeing a lot more people building in EDI training days on long running shows. So beyond what is actually very fair, you just do it, I think, particularly when it comes to training in a school. Beyond that, how do we ensure that there is that collaboration, and that those rooms can be accessible, and that these really exciting possibilities are as discussed as what if we put 5 lights in and had many smoke machines? Robert, can I come to you with that?
Yeah, I mean, I love smoke machines, so bring them in. But I think yes, it's a big issue, but also recognizing that training and the training environments are quite often responding to what the industry is doing. So they argue that they're setting people up for a career. So until they see that the industry is demanding knowledge of access, they're not going to really do that. You'll get a little bit here and there, but it will not be part of mainstream drama training to look at access until people realise that the industry demands that knowledge. And the only way that the industry will get on board with that is by seeing more and more high quality work by people like Amit, by Rapture Moon, by Bri Bell and these companies. When they see the work that has the integrated access, they see how good it is, they see that it's winning awards and running into a home. It's now that we're at this level, people are going, oh right, okay, so this access stuff is not about dumbing down, it's about creating better, higher quality work. Once they get on board with that, then grammar schools will fall behind. But that's really how we make it happen. I think also we can overegg the importance of what you learn at grammar school. Yes, it's a great environment, and yes, I think it's a great place to try things and to make mistakes in a way that you can't when you're working, because you have to be the top of your game. But I learned a lot in the last 20 years that I would never learn at girls' school. So I think, yeah, we have to not hold it quite the high esteem that some people do. So there's other ways to develop these skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I'm very aware that we have another question, and then I'm going to do a sort of wrap up and two final questions, but they're quick questions, I promise. Which is just a question about, do you have any advice for getting access support when making Arts Council applications, particularly Arts Council England? I've heard that ACE will pay, but don't know where to begin. I have a bit of an answer to this because I have been an access worker before for these applications, which is, I think there's an email on the website that I now can't remember, but if we can find it, we'll try and check it in the YouTube chat. And if you email them, I still think it works in the way that you have to find somebody to be your access worker, which is a little bit annoying. But they might be able to suggest some people, and what they will do is you'll agree a number of days and how much they'll be paid, and Arts Council England will pay for that for you. And then within the application itself, there's also a different section for access costs, which don't add into your budget. So, you know, if you're applying for an under 30 and with the access costs it's 35, that doesn't matter. That won't count. Hopefully that sort of answers the question. I don't know if anyone has anything to add on that. Great. Well, I realize we're coming to the end of time, and I do have two sort of final questions that I'm hoping will be quite nice, but this has been really so interesting. I feel like I'm the luckiest fly on the wall to be here. And yeah, my final two questions, and I love doing a couple of like little positive spin questions. So we've already talked a lot about there not being loads of answers. So instead of asking you for like, what's your best advice for allies or for somebody, what is your provocation, your question that you would have for everyone who wants to make their spaces more accessible, who wants to be doing this work, who is an ally? What's a provocation that you'd give them? And what is some advice that you'd give to either your younger self or a disabled young person looking at getting into MT and musical theatre? So what's your piece of advice for somebody like a young version of you, and your provocation to an ally? I'm going to let that hang in the air for a second before I make somebody speak first, because that feels really, really mean. They're big questions, but Beth, can I start with you?
Of course. I think my question is why? Why do you want to make your show accessible? Is it because you think you have to, or because you want to? And really interrogate that, because I think all the best art comes from love and want and acceptance and those type of things. I think if you're doing something because you feel you have to, you're not going to end up doing it well. And I think really interrogate that within yourself. And why do you want to make this show now, and with who? And then once you've kind of found those answers and found the world that you want to create, or the world that you want to show, or the specific epoch in time that you're talking about, once you've found them, you can kind of then from that point start building on, so who's in this world? What are we actually saying? And how do we make this so that as many people as physically possible can be here and can also have this? I think that's the main thing. I think sometimes I go and see shows, or I'm in shows, or I'm in processes, and I kind of go, I don't think you know. And then that's when I feel like the responsibility falls to our community, because we turn up in processes or in rooms, whatever it is, and it's, well, you know, we're inclusive because we've got you, so what do you want? What do you need? How do we do this? And, you know, that's then putting a lot of pressure on those people. So I think really interrogate why and how. And if you don't, it's one of those, if you don't have the budget, if you don't have the money, all of those things, should you be doing it? And I think they're the questions that just why, I guess. Advice for my younger self or a different, someone in a position. I think if you can't see yourself or hear your voice reflected in the shows you're singing or the industry that you love, that isn't the industry not wanting or needing you. Actually, it's the gap that you need to fill, that you have this amazing opportunity to then let your voice be heard. And when you do that, when you feel comfortable and safe enough, and that is a whole culture thing, but when you do that, your people, those people that echo you and hold you and love you, will be there. And I think it's that, don't let not seeing yourself put you off doing it. And I know that's terrifying, but there are people, and I'm looking at many of them right now on this Zoom, that want and need more voices and more people and more experience, more lived experience, and everyone in this world, because theatre is idiosyncratic. Actors are, creatives are, like, no one person is the same as another person, and everyone has the chance to have that voice and that space. And we sometimes have to take it, sometimes we have to seize it, sometimes we have to make our own spaces, but that space is yours. So please take it. And if you ever want advice or anything, there are people out there and there is support there. But yeah, do it with love, and I think it will echo back to you.
Amazing. Robert.
Yeah, so my proposition would be, look at the story that you want to tell, look at what that's about, and then look at why you want to exclude certain people from hearing about that story. And I say that quite purposefully, and I think people think that by doing nothing, they're not causing offence, and they're not excluding people. And that's not the case. By doing nothing, you are excluding people. The default is to exclude. So look at why you want to exclude people. If you don't want to exclude people, then get on with making your work accessible, and do it properly and do it well. And also make mistakes, because we all do that, and try things and mess up, and do all of that. But recognize that exclusion happens by default, and the only way to work into that is to do something inclusive, is to make something accessible. So really ask yourself the question of why you're not doing that, because it's no longer good enough to pretend it's not happening, or to say that, oh, I don't get the money or I don't get the time. Like, shut up. We've had that for years. We don't care about that anymore, so stop that. It's my response to that. And my message to my younger self, I don't know, you got a wild bag ahead of you. And yeah, whenever you think you've got it worked out, something will come along to give you a surprise. But that's okay, because that's how this game works. I think, I don't know, if I knew then what I know now, I probably wouldn't still be doing what I'm doing now. So there's something about ignorance that's not a bad thing in this game. It's, you have to learn it bit by bit, you have to build it up piece to piece, and then you get to some place that's somewhere that's better or more, or I don't know. But the ride is a lot of fun.
That is great. I definitely agree with it. If I knew what I was doing when I started, I wouldn't be here now. And Michelle.
So I think my advice to my younger self, or to somebody starting out in the industry, would be fight for your right to be ordinary, and then you'll be amazing. And I think my provocation was going to be the same as Robert's, actually. So I'm going to tweak it a little bit. And my provocation would be, you work in the theatre, for fart's sake. Sort yourself out. Do you know, if we can't do it in our industry, then what hope is there? And there is no such thing as neutral, which is picking up on Robert's theme. So take your responsibility, work out how you're excluding me, and stop it.
That's great. Thank you all so much. Just as a quick clarification to what I said earlier, on the ACE website, it's a form, not an email. But I think the form goes to an email. That's my fault. Thank you all so much for joining us and for giving us so much of your time and wisdom. It's hugely appreciated. And thank you to everybody who's watching either live or on the recording. Hopefully those provocations will be very helpful to everybody as well. I'm not sure if Meg and James are going to reappear or if I'm going to do a wrap up. So there we go.
Hello. Thank you so much, Amina, and our wonderful panel. Just I'm sure we're having some sort of visual or audible applause from anyone watching this in the future or presently to our wonderful panel of Michelle, Beth and Robert. You've been brilliant. Your wisdom has been really thought-provoking, and there's so many really practical, useful insights there. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I totally forgot to do a visual description at the start, and that's my mental reminder. I always must do that when I do a brief introduction as well. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining you. So I'm signing off as a white male with barely any hair on the top of my head and a grey shirt and a dark grey jersey. I know many people have been watching live and many will watch later on, and be so grateful to you all for sharing your wisdom. And if anyone is watching later and have any further questions, do by all means feel free to get in touch with us at MTN and we can signpost you or respond ourselves. You're most welcome to email me, James at musicaltheatrenetwork.com, and we will be able to signpost any further questions if you weren't watching live and have an outstanding question you'd like to us to address. But thank you for joining us, and thank you again to our